Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. As a special edition episode this week in honor of Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm going to share a couple episodes with you of a podcast and exclusive YouTube show for me called Mental Health Headline Hot Takes, which I co-host with Todd Rennebohm every week on my YouTube channel or on the Bunny Hugs and Mental Health podcast feed. You will find weekly episodes that drop on a Thursday where we each bring a article based on something happening in the news on mental health, and we discuss, debate, and try to figure out some key takeaways from it for all of us. So in honor of Men's Mental Health Awareness, I'm going to give you a couple of those episodes streamed here. If you don't watch them on YouTube, I encourage you to go subscribe on my YouTube, which is the handle Eyes Wide Open Content, or go subscribe and look up Bunny Hugs and Mental Health Podcast. For this week's episode, you're going to get two dudes talking about mental health in honor of Men's Mental Health Awareness. I hope you enjoy the episodes, and be sure to check me out on YouTube. Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Mental Health Headline Hot Takes. I'm Nick. I have Todd here, and we're spinning the wheel to make the deal. Or
you can say stop again.
If I'm being predictive here based on past experiences, I will not have any chance of winning this spin. But stop.
Spin again.
Stop.
Nick goes first.
Oh, wow. Okay. I guess if you complain enough, the wheel unrigs. So mine isn't exactly an article today, but I thought this would be interesting to talk about for you and I. The UCAN Foundation, Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network, celebrated its 1-year birthday recently.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And it's this, along with a lot of other things going on, have really sort of gotten me thinking a little bit differently about this stuff and my role. So for those of you who don't know, I started the UCAN Foundation with a few other folks, co-founded, I should say. I co-founded the UCAN Foundation. And the purpose was in response to my experience on Love is Blind and post Love is Blind and the aftermath and the giant gap that I saw in several areas of that whole process, right? So the UCAN Foundation is dedicated to providing mental health services and legal services to past, present, and future reality cast members, because the industry is very exploitative. It's a churn and burn, it's cheap, and somehow cast members are oftentimes exploited. I wouldn't be surprised to find out if some actually got exploded. So we're getting there. But in terms of that, we're also advocating for change in the industry. So the industry of reality TV has escaped any regulation or labor laws that are in the workplace. So they can really get away with having people work long hours, do things that are unsafe. They're very manipulative of people and their mental health, their triggers. And so this was my response to leaving the reality TV industry better than I found it and paving a road as a path for others to follow so that we can come together and change this industry and make it less exploitative. People's lives literally get ruined. But the reason I wanted to bring this up today is, so I was once again featured in an article, pretty much an essay expose of whether or not Love is Blind is a toxic workplace. And in this article, which I will link below, this article is headlined, "Is Love is Blind a Toxic Workplace? Reality TV contestants are barely paid and the experience can feel like abuse. Former cast members of Netflix mega hit are speaking out and calling for solidarity." And this is by Emily Nussbaum, published May the 20th. So I have I wanted to kind of tie all this together for two reasons of things I wanted to say. One, looking back on the progress that the UCAN Foundation has made and the impact we're already having on the industry. And I could list those. There's also a link to our post on our Instagram that has more of this information. But we've really made an impact in so many ways in the industry just by being vocal and giving people space to be vocal. We've had over 100 cast members that have come to the UCAN Foundation to speak with us. All over the course of a year, we have hundreds of mental health professionals that have joined our network across all 50 states. We have dozens of lawyers and attorney firms from a labor perspective and entertainment perspective that are in our database. We've connected cast members with those mental health services and with legal support in so many ways. And what this year that went by really quick for me, and then tied up with this article, it really has me reflecting on the work. And I'm not someone who likes to take a lot of credit. I'm not someone who, I'm a reluctant leader, I say often, where I'll lead when no one else will, but I will give every other person the opportunity to take ownership and leadership on something before I do it. That's kind of what I felt happened here, right? I had to do it because somebody had to do it and no one else was doing it. So this and a lot of my thought lately in my own head has been, why am I doing this? And what is my purpose for doing this? Right. And so the year, the article, my own reflections, as you know, I trauma response, keep myself very, very busy all the time. So I don't have to sit with my thoughts. So I've been trying to do that. And what I've realized is that my story is in the middle of my story. And I get goosebumps when I say this because this is it's like a hard thing to realize. I thought when I was divorced publicly and everything didn't go the way that I had planned and my whole life was disrupted and my whole life was ruined, that the end of my story was getting away from all of this and getting back to my reality and getting back to the way my life was before any of this. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized through this last year that I'm in the middle of my fucking story. And this is my story that I have reluctantly taken back control of by not being silenced by NDAs and recognizing the legalities of all of this and doing all this work that I've been doing. And so, not to toot my own horn, but this is my story and I'm in the middle of it and I'm the one telling it. It's not going to be some reality TV show. It's not going to be the media. It's going to be me. And I'm leading here. And there are people, and someone called me a trailblazer the other day. And I like the term because I stepped up when no one else would. I risked everything because I felt like I had nothing to lose. And now there's more and more people speaking up. There's more lawsuits for illegal activities from reality TV, and there's more and more coming all the time. There's more coming. Like I know of more coming that we've helped with throughout the UCAN Foundation. So that and just the little tweaks and changes that we've seen, like Love is Blind cast members are getting aftercare therapy paid for now. Now there's some shady ass caveats that they try to put with that, but like that was nearly impossible for me to find when I was going through that. And so I am proud of us celebrating 1 year. I'm proud of the progress we've made. I want to be clear too, like this isn't for me. I will not get anything out of this except finishing my fucking story. And yeah, it's amazing to look back on the accomplishments. It's amazing to know that it was all like done out of passion, like there was no money made. And so kind of all of this stuff coming together has made me realize that my legacy, which I've been thinking about a lot lately in all of this, is my legacy is that I'm turning my experience into serving others. Yeah, that's all with UCAN. And I guess the birthday kind of helped me with everything else going on, reflect on all of that. And I just wanted to share that we're changing this industry and everyone who is with us and everyone who's supporting us and in solidarity with us. This is all of you too. You're part of this story. So, I just wanted to say happy birthday, UCAN. Congratulations to honestly, myself and all of the other people that have helped make this thing float. And we've started to see real change. And change doesn't happen overnight, especially when you're going up against such a big conglomerate. And so I just wanted to thank everybody who has helped us this last year from a PR perspective. Sarah Fruman, our publicist, doing all volunteer work, our social team, Ruthie and Hope, wonderful, doing a great job on our social. Obviously, the board of directors, which everybody I think knows by now, but more importantly, everybody out there who is supporting us, because without other people, none of this would matter, right? So, happy birthday to us, happy birthday to all of you, and let's get this done. Is my message there, and I know it's something that you and I had talked about when we first got connected. So I know you watch reality TV. You're very supportive of the mission and everything. So, yeah, I want to thank you too for that. And we didn't even have to get the gratitude spin.
Okay, my story. No, I'm kidding. I'm very, 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 very proud of you. It's amazing. And I mean, to have these people, be held accountable. Well, I don't even know if they're being held accountable, but they are now.
Someone's
Like,
saying
maybe
they
not
should
for
be
their
held
past
accountable.
stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. And yeah, I mean, I had no idea until I talked to you just how many people's lives are being affected by these shows. And then, and I
I'm
know
talking
we've
to
talked
another one later today. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just awful.
I know you always hear that. Well, you signed up for it, but I mean, you
Those
sign up
people
for
aren't
it, but
serious people. If they really think that, they're not serious people.
yeah, I mean, I've signed up for stuff and didn't realize what that exactly entailed and what,
Exactly.
what was going to be the, what's it called? Collateral damage afterwards and
Right.
stuff. And so, and I mean, this is minor stuff I'm talking about. And like my life didn't change. Whereas like folks like you who thought, oh, this would be a cool adventure. And, here's the contract, whatever you sign it. And then,
And I read the
yeah,
contract too. Like, this is like people drive me nuts because they speak about this like they have any idea, even though they've never experienced it. And,
yeah,
I read the contract, but when you don't live it, the contract's just words, right? I didn't
exactly.
know how I was going to feel when I was being filmed 18 to 20 hours a day, not sleeping, completely out of my structure. Like you can't plan for that. There's no way to plan for that. So that's just one
Mm-hmm.
of the things. But people, people who say you signed up for it, but you did sign up for it, but changed my mind, cool, let's talk. If you signed up for it and mic drop, like you're not a serious person and you don't deserve to be engaged on the topic.
Mm-hmm. Or they're so, I don't, because I know people that are reality TV fans and they just refuse to hear the negative stuff about it. It's
Well,
like,
I think what it does, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and I start saying this phrase too, like when someone's telling their experience and it's negative, like you as a viewer, there's a shame element I think that can be there, and you don't want to face
right.
it. And
Yeah.
the bottom line is like no one's faulting you for watching or enjoying reality TV. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
saying, like as a viewer, assume some of the responsibility to at least fight for better treatment. Like, I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
stop watching reality TV. I'm just saying, like,
Mm-hmm.
be a part of the right side of history, which is what we're doing with UCAN Foundation and all of the people that are supporting it. Right. And,
Mm-hmm.
I had
So,
to
I mean, there's no
tie
reason you can't make these shows ethically and still have the same product.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. People are dramatic and they will be dramatic, and you don't have to escalate situations to complete and utter chaos to get that. Right. And so,
Mm-hmm.
what I say this is, the stuff that happens to people lose their jobs, people have lost their lives, people have been severely
Mm-hmm.
injured,
Mm-hmm.
their mental health just trashed. I lived that with, my ex-wife too, lived that. And there's a responsibility there, I think, as a viewer to acknowledge people who have been damaged or victimized by an industry, without any real takeaway from it or tangible thing. Which, by the way, I don't care how much you pay me. like, you can't abuse me. Like, I'm a human being. You know what I mean? And I think like
Mm-hmm.
what's become so important to me with this whole, like, I have to finish this. This is my story. I'm in the middle of it, is because
Mm-hmm.
what happened to me is I felt like I was lacking a personal connection to it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that by recalibrating how I think about it, and how this is, this is for my healing. This is my, and my therapist said this week.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, this is um, this is your closure. Your closure is this. So that's where I was like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of my book. And until I get to the end of this, until there's a real reckoning, if you will, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the middle of the story. And so my closure comes from leaving reality TV better than I found it. And I won't ever be able to close this door until I do that. And so that's what I mean
Mm.
by finishing my story. It isn't about
Yeah.
me, but it has to be a personal connection to me. And, those people who think they know anything about it, or don't want to have their eyes open to it, or are that, like, just get out of the way. Like, that's all I have to say
Mm-hmm.
to you. Get out of the way.
And I mean, it's 100% okay to do something that's helping other people, like you're doing, and do it for selfish reasons too. You know what I mean? So if this is your story, that you are getting something out of it, that's fine too. Like, I don't think anyone ever starts uh, something like this without, some personal reason why
Yeah.
they're doing it.
And I
So,
guess I hadn't thought of, I mean, my personal reason was, I can't believe that they did this to me and they did this to Danielle, and they're never going to do
mm-hmm.
it to anybody else. And so it became
Mm-hmm.
about everybody else. And I lacked, and it
Right.
kind of, it gave me, what it was doing was, it was like pulling my motivation away. It
Right.
became another thing that I'm like just re-triggering and traumatizing myself, talking about this over and over and over, and listening to other people. And that's why I was like, well, I have to find out my why. Like, if I don't have a why for this, and my why is other people, that's not going to work for me long term, and I'm going to leave. And I considered it a lot. I considered just kind of withdrawing from it and trying to get out of it. But now I have a new look at it, and it's been, a year of head in the sand, fighting for all this stuff, doing all these interviews, talking to all these cast members, paving the way for these lawsuits, and paving these ways to get labor law changed, and all of this stuff. And it just became very almost transactional. And I would say this to anyone too, like, when your life and what you do becomes transactional, I would take a step internal and make sure this is something that actually has some meaning to you and fulfills your values. Because it's very difficult if you don't have a personal connection to something that's taking up so much of your time.
Mm-hmm. And I found myself sometimes kind of doing the opposite, where it's like I started the podcast and I'm talking to people for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was like very selfish reasons why I started it. And then people are telling me, like, oh, you're making a difference and you're doing, all these wonderful
And it
things,
adds a
getting
level of
positive feedback.
responsibility that you have too.
It does. And it's like, well, that's just bonus because I mean, people are getting something out of it.
Yeah.
Awesome. But really, I kind of started it because I needed free therapy. That was part of my heal. It was all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Things could be more than one thing.
Right.
So,
That's exactly.
yeah. Yeah. Well,
So,
congratulations, man.
well, thank you. Thank you.
I'm incredibly proud of you, and I'm incredibly proud of, everyone involved with UCAN. And I mean, I shudder to think if you hadn't started UCAN, I mean, it would just be continuing, right? Like,
And the amount of people that have told us that, it's
mm-hmm.
crazy. And that's the thing too, like with you and what you're saying with your podcast, there's like a level of responsibility that I feel when people are like, thank you, lead me, we trust you, I trust you with my story. Like, the amount
Mm,
of, like, the podcast I'm recording later today, like, I told this person, thank you for trusting me. I always tell them, thank you for trusting me with your story.
mm-hmm.
Because the thing with reality TV, and a lot of people get, quote, a villain edit, they feel misrepresented. And I know everyone can relate to like feeling misrepresented, or like someone doesn't understand you, or you're not being seen, or you're not being heard. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're edited that way to be misrepresented on purpose to a large audience across the whole world, the element of you speaking and, with the NDAs and with all the potential legalities of it, the fact that you choose to speak against a narrative that everybody has a belief in true, like there's responsibility that comes with that. And if I come in and I don't give someone the space to tell the truth of their story or of their narrative of who they are, I'm no better than the production company, right? Like I'm no
Mm-hmm.
better than that. And so I take a lot of there's a lot of responsibility with this too. So it's like the
For
same with
sure.
you have people you're helping with your podcast. It gives you a level of responsibility to do right by those people and your guests and yourself and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I could get into more of that stuff, but like, I'm always very careful. I'm not exploiting my guests. I'm
Right.
trying to, even though they might have a fantastical story or something, but it's like, I don't want to do that. But
Well, I have this personal policy too, which people, man, we're getting some wild looking weather out here today. I have this personal policy with like reality cast members. I don't actually ask them to come on my podcast unless
right.
they express interest or ask, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to think that I am trying to exploit them
Mm-hmm.
for
Right.
my own podcast. My podcast doesn't make any real money, so it's not even I've
Oh, I
accepted
know that.
that. Yeah. But yeah, yeah, because I don't want to exploit people for myself or for UCAN either. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not in my nature. So
I, the part I love about what you did with UCAN was you've given people permission to openly talk about this stuff and, you know,
yeah.
shed light on what was happening and is happening and what needs to be changed. So, like I said, like those 100 people that reached out to you, they would have had nowhere to go over this
That's
last
what they
year. And
most of them say that.
you've, by being that trailblazer, you've given permission for other people to go, wait a minute, my time in reality TV kind of sucked, or the outcome of being on the TV sucked, and
Yeah.
I was taken advantage of. So
And my hope
kudos.
too is the way I'm thinking about it now is like, and this is from a podcast guest that I had recorded with yesterday. Dr. Paul Rivera is his name, and he coined the trailblazer thing, right? And it's like you're making a road where there's no road, and you're building the road so there's a road for the people that come behind you. And that's kind of how I think that resonated with me.
So even if it is just a trail, even if it's not a road you've made yet, at least now you've gotten people on your side to then behind you improve that road even more. And
Mm-hmm.
behind them, there'll be someone that can improve it even more and even more. And pretty soon you'll have this,
So now
you know.
you've basically put this road under construction for 100 years, like all the major highways in this country, in our country. But yes, that's a great point.
Oh, well, congratulations. Okay. So my story um, is it's called "A Psychologist Explains the Issue with Mental Health, quote unquote, hyper awareness." It's Mark Travers, and this was in Forbes magazine. He says, despite this commendable shift towards openness, a strange trend has occurred. As our collective consciousness around mental health issues has expanded, so too has their prevalence. Are we inadvertently normalizing mental health struggles to the extent that they become an expected aspect of life? So we were kind of talking about this.
I was going to say this is an
Was it
extension
last
of
episode?
one of the last couple.
Yeah. He said, and in doing so, we are exacerbating the very issues we want to address. Interpreting normal levels of anxiety as being indicative of an anxiety disorder may lead to behavioral avoidance, which can further amplify anxiety. This cyclical process of interpretation and symptom exacerbation then fuels further awareness efforts, ultimately creating a feedback loop of intensified focus on mental health issues. This prompts individuals to become overly alert, cynical, and on the lookout for anything that rings a psychological bell, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that is now referred to as the prevalence inflation hypothesis. So he said he thinks the major thing is social media, because I've gotten a lot of great education from social media, but people go on social media, they like these things, then the algorithm then shows you more of that stuff.
Yep.
So then you self-diagnose yourself. So then you go and see a doctor and they say, no, you don't have it. So now you don't trust the healthcare system that's already kind of failing in a lot of ways. And then you
That's a
go
whole
back to
nother
social
layer.
media to get validation, and the cycle continues. So that's his take on that. And it is concerning.
Well,
I mean,
I think there's another layer to that medical piece too, where at least here in this country, big pharma is like they advertise like
right.
you can't watch a program or go online and at least in my algorithm and not see like antidepressant commercials and ads, and then if your antidepressants not enough, here's a Abilify. And so then they go to the
Mm-hmm.
doctors and they incentivize them to prescribe specific things for whatever, and then you go in and you're like, I'm depressed, and they ask you a couple questions and then write you a script, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so what happens then is you're incentivizing both sides, right? You're incentivizing, not even
Yeah.
incentivizing, you're marketing to someone who's going to then go to the doctor, who's then incentivized to do it. And it's like, well, are we actually like, is this helping? And it's the same on the social media side, or people that pop to different doctors, which I do think it's good to get more than one opinion, don't get me wrong there, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
weird cycle.
Yeah. And yeah, it is weird because it's like, okay, so more people are getting help that need the help, but also you're also creating like this weird complex too that everybody thinks they need. They're not, shouldn't feel sad once in a while or have
Or
any kind of
anxious.
anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, I don't know how many people are self-diagnosing themselves with ADHD and OCD and
Everyone.
all this stuff.
Everyone
So,
is. Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's a double-edged sword for
Well, then
sure.
on top of that, you have people diagnosing other people that have no credentials or
Mm-hmm.
training whatsoever to do that with social media. I do
Mm-hmm.
think it's like Dr. Isabel wrote an article about this, like for Psychology Today. I think it was Psychology Today. And she was basically saying like all of this therapy speak that people are using now is like creating new meanings for the words. Essentially, like
Mm-hmm.
every one of your exes isn't a narcissist. Like that's a real
Mm-hmm.
personality disorder that should be not thrown around the way that it is. Stuff like that. I think it can. I think we have to.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
saw
I
a
kind of agree with him, I think.
this really funny video the other day on Instagram. I think I posted it on my stories, but it's like two women drinking wine and they're like, I think the waiter forgot her water. He's a narcissist. Oh, he is a narcissist. Yeah. He's not holding space for us. Oh, he's not. And they just, all these kind of
Yeah.
trendy psychological words they're throwing into this
And I
goofy
feel
video.
like
And
sometimes people like wear it as a badge of honor. And
well, that's
and
right.
that's a fine line of like advocating, because I do see people like myself. I'm open about depression, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
don't wear it as a badge of honor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, if I do, someone tell me, but that's not my point with it, right? So I think that's
Yeah.
also a weird
It's funny you
line
say
to
that
toe.
because he did mention that in the article too, that
Mm,
it is like, it's almost like trendy, and so you have to get on that trend. And yeah, and a lot of people make it their identity.
yes, that's what I was getting at.
Maybe some people should, right? Like that is pretty much their identity. I don't know. It seems like it's my identity, but only because I have the podcast and
But
I'm
you
trying to
don't.
push mental health stuff. But
Yeah, but I've
I
never
don't know.
heard you define yourself by it. Like that's, if you're making something your
Right?
identity,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
defining it. You're working within what you have and what you live with, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not using it as an excuse to get something, I guess, right? Or get special
Sex.
treatment or attention or anything like, yeah, whatever
I
that
use
might
it for
be.
sex. I'm like, I'm so depressed. I need sex.
I don't think that one would work.
They're like, oh well. Anyway, yeah, I don't think it would work either. So anyway, it was kind of nice running into that article because we just did kind of have that discussion, and he put it more eloquently than perhaps I did
Yeah,
earlier.
it's a
But
fine line. I think it's a fine line of like finding the advocacy and the normalization, but not empowering self-diagnosis, diagnosis of others without credentials, and changing the literal meaning of words by misusing them.
I think maybe any kind of major progress in anything, maybe there is a kind of a timeline of where it does become trendy,
Mm-hmm.
and then once the trend drops off, then how the movement started, God, or
Yeah,
why the movement started does stick. I don't know.
right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It
So then,
does.
I mean, ultimately, I think it'll be a good thing once the trend kind of goes away. But anyway, so yeah,
Yeah,
we our shows are getting longer and longer. We're getting
I
more
know.
chatty.
I think it's me. I'm finding things that are like,
You have hot takes on.
yeah, I actually have hot takes on. So,
If you have any comments or articles or questions or feedback, please let us know. Our contacts are in the show notes. And if you would like to watch this episode, be sure to go onto Nick's YouTube Eyes Wide Open channel,
eyes wide
I
open
believe.
content. Yes.
Okay.
But the link's below.
And yeah, check out all the links. So until next time, thanks for listening and watching.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Mental Health Headline Hot Takes with Nick and Todd. And we are going to spin this wheel and see who gets to go first. Stop. What does it say?
Statement of gratitude by Nick.
Oh, wow. That's the first time we've ever gotten that.
Look at that.
Well, I have a good one. I am grateful for your continued flexibility with my chaotic schedule and my forgetfulness, especially the last few weeks as I've been traveling for work and traveling for work 2 weeks straight. So, yeah,
Wow.
I'm grateful for your flexibility on scheduling and willingness to work within my craziness the last couple of
Hey,
weeks,
it's my
especially.
pleasure. I have a life too. I get it. I appreciate that, but thank you. Okay, here we go again.
And stop.
Todd goes first.
Now back to regularly scheduled programming.
I think it does work better when you do the stop part. Okay, so this story is called Teens Who Use Marijuana Are More Likely to Suffer Psychotic Disorders, study
I saw
finds.
this.
And the article is by Akshay Sayal, MD. This is from NBC News. And it says teenagers who used cannabis within the last year had a dramatically higher rate of developing a psychotic, oh my God, a psychotic disorder, according to a study published Wednesday. The study, led by researchers from the University of Toronto, found an 11 times higher risk of developing a psychotic disorder among teenagers who used cannabis compared to those who did not. When the analysis was limited to just emergency rooms visits and hospitalizations, there was a 27-fold increase in psychotic disorders in teenagers who used the drug. Andre McDonald, the study's lead author, says, I think there's enough evidence out there for us to give recommendations that teens probably shouldn't be using cannabis, which is the understatement of the year. While most teenagers use cannabis, will not develop psychotic disorders, McDonald said the findings are concerning, given how debilitating these conditions can be. The new study, like previous research on marijuana psychosis, does not directly prove that marijuana is causing the psychotic disorders. While it's possible that teens who are prone to develop psychotic disorders could just be craving marijuana, but it's unlikely because of how striking the association was. One theory is that disruptions to the endocannabinoid system in adolescence may make psychotic symptoms more likely. So there you go.
Well, I think this is simple. I have a hot take, and it's simple and it's quick and it's easy. And it is when a brain is developing at such a young age, I don't think we should be using these types of treatments. And I extend that out to some medications too. Like I think
Yeah.
about the roller coaster of emotions and stuff of being a young kid for me, and then a teenager, and even a young adult into my 20s. It was a freaking roller coaster. I shouldn't have been doing anything that like alters my brain chemistry, like you're not even fully developed. So I just think that's something that we should be very careful with. That's also, I really, really struggle with like kids that are like put on Ritalin or ADHD medication so willingly, when it's like maybe they're just a kid or gonna grow out of it or something. I'm not saying that's necessarily the case for everyone, but it just seems so normalized now that anything to me that chemically alters the brain of a young person whose brain is still developing, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the results could be. And we should study that more.
I do have some young relatives that are on ADHD meds, and they're prepubescent. One is pubescent, I guess, but
What does that mean? I don't even know what that word means.
pre-puberty.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Didn't know that.
I worry, but also, I mean, it is helping them, but I don't know what long-term effects are going to do. But yeah, and like when you think of hormones and all the things that a teenager, it's like having a pregnant woman smoking weed. Like
we all agree that's a bad idea, right?
Yeah, but it just forget the effects that it's going to do to the baby. But like it will, I mean, their brains are already full of change in hormones and whatever. It would be nice to know how many young kids are going to substances because their brains are craving it, like they are prone to it.
Well, and just the curiosity of it,
yeah,
you're so uncomfortable in your skin so much of the time that like you just want anything to kind of like at least that's how I felt. Yeah.
Did you ever use marijuana or alcohol as a teenager?
I did not actually. I didn't drink until I was 21. I didn't try any cannabis until it was legal.
Really?
Yeah, I was pretty straight and narrow.
Wow. The Catholic Church did a number on you.
Sure did.
Well, I started drinking when I was like 12 or 13, I think. But
most people have. I think that's so, I can't even imagine being 12 or 13 and drinking.
I mean,
like I was writing screenplays and playing with action figures. Like
I was doing that too, but I was hammered. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, even just looking at my kids who are like 17 and 19, I'm like, they seem way too young to do anything. I'm like, oh my God, I was even younger than, like, I was 5-10 years younger than them. But I didn't use marijuana until I was in my 20s. But I know, like they say, even with drinking as a teenager, with addictions, it's like the when you start drinking regularly, you're almost like emotionally stunted at that age too, let alone whatever it's actually doing to your brain too and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know if legalization is making things worse or kids are just going to do that stuff anyway, but
I think we're just speculating, no data, but it probably just makes it easier to get. That makes it, right, more readily available.
Yeah. And I guess less scary too, because you're like it's one thing drinking underage. It's another thing, like I'm drinking underage, and this is like, an illegal substance I'm using.
Right.
So yeah, it's probably not helping, but I have no answers. I just have.
No, I don't either. I don't either. I just think we need to be careful with what we do with developing brains and look into more research as to how different types of things impact people's mental wellness.
And I mean, as a kid, I was told all this stuff even 30 years ago, wherever it was. It didn't stop me from trying it. Then once I tried it, I liked it.
Did you have?
I did it more.
Did you have Dare?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Or Just Say No.
Yeah,
what's her
Just
Nancy
Say No.
Reagan thing? Yeah. Kids around school would be wearing Just Say No hats.
Dare hats for us, or shirts. It was shirts.
Yeah.
With shirts.
Yeah, it was shirts. Yeah.
D, I won't do drugs. A, won't have an attitude. R, I will respect myself. And E, I will educate. That's what it stands for.
Oh,
There's a song.
Okay.
I could sing the song, but I won't.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not.
No, it's copyrighted.
Yeah.
We don't want to get
Right.
So
I guess
yes.
this is my turn.
Sure.
So my story is kind of sad, but it highlights an issue that I champion, myself. But the headline is Parents Called for Mental Health Help. The police arrived and fatally shot their son. The subheadline, less than 10 seconds after officers opened the door, police shot Yong Yang in his parents' Koreatown home while he was holding a knife during a bipolar episode.
Less than 10 seconds.
Less than 10 seconds. And the link down here in the show notes, I just want to warn everyone, or if you want to see it, there is video of from the police cam, the body cam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
damn.
Yong was 40 years old. He had a knife in his hand. Less than 10 seconds, he was shot and fatally killed. He has a diagnosis of bipolar disorder for 15 years. And in an episode, and this is why you can't call the police who have no crisis training, have no mental illness training, and are a bunch of trigger happy crazy people, it seems like sometimes. And that's not a knock on all cops, but it's a knock on a lack of training. And on top of that, you have an entire system that is needed for crisis intervention with trained professionals, with trained mental health experts, to de-escalate these situations. Like, I'm sure they were terrified and they didn't know what to do, but please do not call the police if someone's in a mental health crisis. It's just, this happens a lot, and a lot more than it should. And so I just wanted to highlight this because I think that it's a really big issue that people with mental health illness challenges, whatever, are being victimized in this type of way. It's awful. I mean, it's just awful.
What city was this in?
It was somewhere in California. I can look really quick. It might have been LA.
It says Koreatown. I just think LA, but
Los Angeles. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, it happens here in Canada too. I think it does depend on the city and the state, probably, because there has been some in my local city. There's been some improvements. There's a team of social workers now that go out with the cops during.
We have that in
these
in
health
a
checks.
specific district in Chicago that I know of for sure too.
Oh yeah, right. So,
but the dispatcher,
it's kind of being addressed. But
if I remember correctly, though, the dispatcher has to say or identify that this is a mental health crisis. So there's still that level of why do we not have them for everything, right?
Yeah. And there was no mention, no one's blaming the race or anything like that of the, it's not like a racial thing at all.
Not in the article. I do think it's noteworthy though, because, people, how do I say this?
Well, if the police went to some house in Beverly Hills when it was white people and it was a guy holding a knife, would the same thing happen?
Well, the police officer was Andres Lopez. So it's like,
oh, I see. Okay.
I think you don't want to discount the race, but I don't think they're not saying it's because of the race, right?
Okay. Not in this instance anyway.
Yeah. And especially you don't want, I wouldn't want to discount the race because, hey, everyone, Korean Americans also have mental health challenges. It's like I'm mentioning it again, but Dr. Paul Rivera, who I recorded a podcast with, he talks a lot about redefining Latino masculinity, but it is also, there's masculinity in general, but there's a specific, reason that Latino masculinity also needs to be something that's identified as a subset, right? So I think it's similar
each
here.
Each culture has their own view of masculinity, and I think I said this a few episodes ago too, that during my suicide attempt, there was a knife and stuff, and cops came in, and I'm just so grateful things didn't escalate. I didn't go to jail.
I thought of you
I didn't
when
get
I read this,
yeah.
actually.
Oh,
Yeah, I
yeah.
thought of your
Okay,
story.
interesting. Yeah, I didn't get zapped. I didn't get shot. I didn't go to jail. I got handcuffed and sent to a hospital to get help,
Mhm.
which is
That might have gone very different in the
nice.
U.S., to be honest.
Well, even here in Canada, like I said, the one cop, he was on Facebook being discriminatory towards Indigenous people, and there's a lot of Indigenous population around me, and if I was Indigenous, would it have, had the same results? Yeah. So who would you call then? Instead, if you were
So
these people's parents or
if
this person's parents?
um that's a good question. I would probably call I would
Is there
that's a
a
good
crisis helpline or something?
I mean, you could always call a crisis helpline, but I feel like um there are like mental health services in Chicago. Like we do have public services. Here in LA, there was a mental health department that declined to comment, but they did say in previous statements that they have field intervention teams that are trained to de-escalate mental health crises without law enforcement. So in this
Mm,
effort here, they and maybe there was an educational piece, right, where they just didn't know. And I can imagine,
mm-hmm.
I think about this sometimes where I'm like, what would happen if I got mugged? What like so there's flight and God, I can't speak again. It's like every
Fight,
week,
flight,
flight or
freeze, or
fight.
fawn.
Yeah. And so I think like in a crisis like that, you might instinctually just call 911
Mm-hmm.
and not
Right.
be able to clearly think about what the options are. But then you also have to know that there are other solutions there, right? So
Yeah, right. It's like any other training. You have to get it in your brain, and I mean, I'm sure his parents were scared. Like maybe he was being violent towards them with a knife. Like, of course you want to call police
yeah.
when you
Well, they had
that.
said it never turned
Uh,
violent.
oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay, interesting.
So yeah, anyway, the whole situation is just awful. Yeah, I just hope
Mm,
that when there are mental health departments or services, people think and have the wherewithal to go that route. Because
mm-hmm.
typically they're going to be trained to in some way to de-escalate potential violence. Now, I'm not saying that someone, in crisis who has a gun and is shooting a gun or something, like, okay, maybe it's time to call the police, right? You got to find that line. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just sad.
Yeah, and I mean, if you are in a mental health crisis and you are having homicidal or suicidal thoughts, sirens and lights and people in uniforms with guns, just seeing that
Mm-hmm.
does not de-escalate anything. And
No.
it's like so. Yeah, I don't
Did
know,
you
but I
think
also
in your
yeah.
experience, like, were you were, I remember we talked about it on my podcast, but what was your thought when the police came? If you remember, like, did you have any,
Man, I don't know. I was
yeah,
so
I
completely out of
bet.
it. Um, I mean, it did. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? It didn't make me more violent, but it did de-escalate it. That's for sure. Like it
Yeah.
was like, yeah. I think if someone with a lab coat came in and said, "Todd, I think you're acting irrational," it would have been better, perhaps, as opposed to like
Well,
because
and
they came in
trained
and
in de-escalating someone who's in an episode, right?
right. Well, see, in my situation, my brother was on top of me, holding me down. So then the cops came in, saw a knife on the floor and a big guy on top of another guy,
Mm-hmm.
and they just like started like grabbing my brother, and like it was like instantly all hell broke loose too. Like they said under 10 seconds was the same thing. Like the police came in and was just like, holy shit, what's going on? And then like yeah, and then there
Yeah.
was like it was like a hockey fight in the corner, just like it was chaos. So from what I remember, or from what I remember slash what I was told, because I don't quite
Right.
remember, but
Right.
um yeah, it was definitely not de-escalating. It wasn't like they came in and said, "Sir, why are you on top of this other gentleman?" It was just like, "What the fuck?" And then, so anyway, yeah.
Well, that makes
good times.
Yeah, it's all very complex, but cops are not trained to be in that situation. Like they're just not.
Yeah.
So
no. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is a sad one. Because one of the reasons it's sad is because we don't have answers, and it's so complex that you can't just make one law or one decision and fix it all. So
that's exactly right.
It's situation to situation, but anyway, if you have any answers how to fix this, let us know. You can contact us with our links below, and you can listen or watch these episodes. Again, the links are below. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.